My son sold his father's legacy and kicked me out. A week later, he was penniless. I had just finished arranging the porch flowers when Tyler pulled into the driveway. The hydrangeas had overgrown their corner bed, so I trimmed them back gently and lined the edges with mulch. The sun had dipped low, softening the air with a peach-colored hush. I wiped my hands on my apron and waited, listening to the steady crunch of his tires against the gravel. Since Peter passed, Tyler had come around more often. At first, it surprised me. He brought groceries, sometimes unasked. Repaired the loose fence gate. Asked about the leaky faucet, though he never quite got around to fixing it. It all seemed thoughtful. Responsible. He even brought Madison once or twice, introducing her with that boyish pride he used to reserve for good report cards and stolen bases. She was polite, always. Too polite. Her eyes scanned the house in a way I didn't like. Not curious, measuring. Like she was assessing square footage, not visiting her future mother-in-law. I noticed the way she touched the banister, ran her finger along the edge of the kitchen counter. She called the guest room cozy but wrinkled her nose when she said it. Tyler began talking about Charlotte. About new developments and quieter neighborhoods. He said I should consider moving in with them once their house was finished. Said it would be easier, on everyone. He made it sound like a kindness. I smiled and said we'd talk about it. That evening, after they left, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and looked out over the backyard, the same yard where Peter and I planted that old oak. The one that still stands, stubborn and generous, shedding leaves like confetti every fall. It wasn't that I didn't want to be closer to Tyler. It was just, the way Madison looked at that tree. As if it was in the way. It started small. A missed appointment here, a rescheduled lunch there. Madison said it was all for my benefit, less driving, fewer errands. I didn't argue. At my age, people stop asking what you want, they just assume what's best. One morning, I noticed my podiatrist visit had been moved to the following month. Clinic's too busy, Madison said over the phone. I called for you. It's handled. She said it like a favor. Then she changed my dentist too. This new one's closer to Charlotte, she said, her voice always just short of condescending. Tyler began echoing her tone. When I brought up the old lot Peter and I had kept behind the orchard, 5 acres that had been in my family since before the war, Tyler smiled like I'd mentioned a childhood hobby. Mom, it's not practical anymore. You can't maintain all that. Why not sell it? Put the money to use. I said I liked the view. That the land gave me room to breathe. He said I didn't need that much space to breathe. At dinner one Sunday, Madison handed me a printed list. She slid it across the table like a restaurant menu. Some ideas, she said. Safe activities. You know, things to keep busy. Tai Chi, bridge club, senior pottery workshops. It's good to stay active. The list was printed in large font. I hadn't asked for it. I folded it and placed it beside my plate. Later, while clearing the dishes, I overheard her speaking to Tyler. Not unkind, not loud, just certain. She shouldn't be worrying about business stuff. That era is gone. It's time. The firm, Carson Solutions, wasn't just a business. Peter and I built it from scratch, in the garage behind this house. For years, we packed boxes at night while Tyler slept. We sealed labels, chased contracts, reinvested every dollar. It became something real. Something lasting. Tyler had joined after college, and we let him take over much of the daily operations. Madison never worked there. Never sat through a board meeting. Never stood in that tiny warehouse with freezing hands labeling parts. But she spoke like she'd buried the business herself. I said nothing. I didn't speak of the nights Peter stayed up poring over balance sheets. I didn't mention the small burn I still have on my arm from the soldering iron, back when we couldn't afford a proper assembly line. I didn't say how much I missed the smell of the packaging paper we used before we could afford glossy wraps. Instead, I just smiled and told Madison I appreciated her concern. That night, I swept the porch again, even though it didn't need sweeping. I thought of Peter, how he used to say that people reveal themselves not in what they give, but in what they take without asking. Madison hadn't taken anything yet. Not exactly. But she was making a list. And Tyler had stopped questioning it. They came on a Thursday. I'd just finished washing the windows. The sky had that early spring stillness, blue, bare, waiting. Tyler arrived with a pie in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. Madison followed, all smiles, wearing a new silk scarf and carrying a small stack of papers. We sat at the kitchen table. The pie, store-bought, sat untouched between us. Tyler poured coffee. His hands trembled slightly. Madison did most of the talking. She was chipper, almost giddy. "We have big news," she said. "And we wanted to tell you in person." I nodded, waiting. Tyler cleared his throat. "We sold the company, Mom. It's done. Finalized yesterday." My first thought was that I hadn't heard him right. Then I looked at the papers Madison laid on the table, signed contracts, wire instructions, legal confirmations. I saw Tyler's name. I saw the buyers. I didn't see mine. He went on, "It's better this way. The market's changed, and, well, you wouldn't understand the new environment. Private equity, restructuring, digital portfolios." His voice drifted. I watched his hands. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I said nothing. Just sipped my coffee, now gone cold. Madison reached across the table, as if to pat my hand. She missed, her fingers hovering awkwardly before retreating. "We wanted to make sure you had time to transition," she said. "The house, your maintenance costs are so high. We're thinking end of the month is reasonable?" I looked at her, then at Tyler. They sat there, confident, courteous. They weren't asking. They were informing. I set my cup down carefully. "End of the month," I repeated. "Yes," Madison replied. "We thought that was fair. And we'll help, of course." "Of course." I stood slowly, the chair legs creaking against the old floor. I walked them to the door. Tyler gave a weak hug. Madison leaned in as if expecting one. I kept my hands at my sides. "Well," I said, opening the door for them. "Good luck." I closed it behind them and leaned my forehead against the wood. I listened to their footsteps fade. Then the engine, the tires on gravel, the silence. I did not cry. I did not panic. Instead, I went upstairs. Past the framed photo of Peter in his navy tie, past the hallway mirror I stopped checking years ago, to the attic stairs, narrow, creaky. At the back of the attic, beneath an old quilt, sat the cedar trunk. We always called it the vault. Inside were the things that mattered, the founding documents, the international contracts, the real records. And tucked between two faded folders was the trust document. The Westfield Trust. Created 5 years ago. 80% ownership, quietly transferred. To me. The firm Tyler sold was a shell. The name, the inventory, maybe. But not the heart of it. Not the IP. Not the trademarks. Not the European contracts. Those sat in the trust. Mine alone. Peter had made sure of it. I ran my fingers over the raised seal, the ink still crisp. Then I went downstairs, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. Outside, the oak tree bent slightly in the breeze, its early leaves trembling. I dialed one number. A voice answered on the second ring. "Frank," I said. "It's Claire." I took a breath. It's time. The next morning, I didn't wake in a rush. I made oatmeal. Fed the birds. Folded laundry that didn't need folding. My hands moved through habit, but my mind stayed still, focused. By noon, I was at Frank's office. His secretary offered tea, but I declined. Frank greeted me with a gentle nod, no questions. He had aged like a man who chose his battles carefully, and today, he understood mine without a word. We reviewed the trust. He confirmed the documents, unrevoked, uncontested. Everything Tyler had sold was, in legal language, non-material holdings. The real weight, the patents, the licensing deals, the contracts, they remained in my control. I asked him to initiate the necessary protections. Freezes. Notifications. Letters of intent. By the time Tyler and Madison set foot on Bahamian sand, the accounts they expected to access would be nothing but empty shells. Frank said, "You're calm." I said, "I've had practice." He smiled slightly, then asked if I wanted to notify Tyler. "No," I said. "Let the silence do the work." By evening, everything was in motion. Back home, I walked through Peter's study. It still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and cedar. The clock ticked faintly on the wall. Nothing had changed in years. I sat down at his desk and opened the center drawer. Inside was the check ledger we used when we couldn't afford QuickBooks. Every page was a year of our lives, suppliers, clients, payroll, even the scribbled notes Peter left for me in the margins. Order more labels. Remind Tyler not to double book next week. Call Frank Re, Zurich. I ran my fingers over the handwriting. Not bitter. Not mournful. Just remembering. That night, I cooked myself dinner. Nothing special, just roasted carrots, lentils, and tea. I didn't light a candle. I didn't dress the table. I didn't need ceremony. Only quiet. Later, I sat on the porch. No music. No lights. Just the sound of leaves brushing against the roof and the occasional snap of cooling wood in the porch beams. I thought about Tyler's face, how he hadn't hesitated. How he looked proud. Not malicious, no. Just sure of himself. Sure that he understood how the world worked now. Madison had trained him well. They believed ownership was a signature. A name on a line. They never understood that legacy isn't built in contracts. It's in the hands that shape the shelves, the nights you stay late after the last employee leaves, the Saturdays spent fixing what no one else notices. They hadn't sold Carson Solutions. They'd sold its shadow. And now, they were about to discover what a shadow is worth. By the time their flight touched down in Nassau, everything had shifted. Frank had filed the injunctions, notified the escrow agents, and, most delicately, alerted the acquiring firm that the assets they believed they had purchased were, in fact, under existing claim by the Westfield Trust. The trust had full rights, exclusive control, and prior ownership dating back 5 years. The acquiring party responded swiftly. They froze the transaction and suspended all pending payments. Which meant Tyler and Madison's celebration never began. I knew the moment it reached them. Not because they called right away, but because their access to the corporate accounts was revoked mid-purchase. The villa, some sprawling white stucco thing with its own dock and a plunge pool, required payment upon arrival. The card declined. Twice. The wire transfer they were counting on? Never initiated. And when they logged into what Tyler assumed was still the company's primary account, the balance read, $0. 00. The bank confirmed it, courteously, of course. The holdings had been transferred to the trust weeks prior. Perfectly legal. Thoroughly documented. That afternoon, Frank called to confirm, they've hit the wall. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Tyler's first call came early the next morning. Mom? His voice was tight, confused. There's something wrong with the bank. We can't access anything. The buyer says the deal's in dispute. Do you know anything about this? I said, have you spoken to your lawyer? He paused. No. I called you. Well, I said gently, maybe speak to your lawyer. He called back twice more. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. By that evening, the messages multiplied, texts, voicemails. Each one louder than the last. Tyler's tone swung between panic and pleading. Madison's messages were colder. More pointed. You've sabotaged us. This is financial abuse. We trusted you. You can't do this to your own family. But I wasn't doing anything. Not anymore. The structure had already been built. The foundations laid long before they ever understood what I was protecting. I was simply letting it stand. On the third day, Madison left a voicemail in a quieter voice. Claire, we're stuck here. The hotel says they'll call the police if we don't vacate by noon. Please, call us back. I didn't. Instead, I went to the orchard Peter had planted. It had rained the night before. The ground was soft, and the peach trees glistened. I walked through the rows slowly, the hem of my skirt brushing damp grass. Each tree still stood exactly where Peter mapped them out in pencil on the back of our mortgage paperwork, row spacing 8 feet, keep east exposure clear. He'd said, it's not just fruit, Claire. It's proof. That we stayed. I stood between 2 trees and looked up. The sky was clear, the sun mild. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the wind touch my face. Back inside, I opened my old notebook. The one with my handwriting, Peter's sketches, and 40 years of ideas. On the last page, in a handwriting that was now only mine, I wrote. When you stop needing their approval, you start remembering who you are. Then I folded the page and placed it back in the vault. Let the next move be theirs. The first voicemail I saved was just Tyler saying my name. Nothing else. Just Mom, and a pause long enough to hear the ocean behind him. The second was longer. We've been trying to get a hold of you. The bank's frozen everything, and the buyer's threatening to sue. Madison's losing it. Please call me back. By the end of day 2, there were 17 voicemails. Each one a degree more frantic. From concern to anger, then confusion, then fear. One message came at 4:17 a.m., a whisper from Tyler, I think we messed up. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. By the third day, the tone shifted again. Madison's voice had lost all pretense. This is financial abuse, she said, clipped and cold. You're unstable. We will sue. You've sabotaged our future. I listened to that one twice. Then I deleted it. They had already returned their rental car. Their hotel room was revoked midday. I knew this not from Tyler but from Frank, who had been contacted by the corporate attorney now representing the confused buyer. The buyer, to his credit, was calm. Not angry. Just surprised. He didn't even ask the right questions, Frank told me. Didn't read the contract. Didn't verify ownership. Signed based on assumed control. He never learned to read fine print, I said quietly. Frank chuckled. Not the first. Won't be the last. That evening, I lit the fireplace for the first time in months. The smoke curled up the chimney as I sat on the old sofa, wrapped in the same knitted throw Peter used to steal on cold mornings. My phone buzzed again. Tyler. I don't know what's happening. Please, just tell me what to do. I thought I was helping us. I thought you wanted this. I didn't answer. Instead, I went to the cabinet in the hall and pulled out the binder, heavy, navy blue, with reinforced corners. The trust documents. The purchase agreements. The original deeds. All there. I placed it on the dining room table. I opened it to the page Peter had signed last, the one with his neat handwriting and calm, deliberate signature. His last legal act. That was the moment the doorbell rang. They were early. I hadn't expected them until morning. Tyler stood on the porch, rumpled and thin. Madison trailed behind him, arms crossed, eyes sunken. Neither looked like someone returning from a luxury vacation. Can we come in? He asked. I opened the door wider but didn't speak. They stepped in. Madison didn't look at the house, just at me. They sat at the kitchen table, across from the binder. I sat down last. Tyler began. We want to understand. There must be some mistake. We thought. He didn't finish. Madison cut in. This is cruel. You trapped us. You could have just said no. You didn't have to destroy the deal. I looked at her. Calmly. Deliberately. I didn't destroy anything, I said. You sold something you didn't own. Tyler's face flushed. But we thought the assets were. They weren't. They never were. You never asked. I turned the binder toward them. This is the trust. These are the controlling documents. This is what you never saw because you never thought to ask. Madison reached for the binder, but I held it down with one hand. You wanted power, I said, but not responsibility. You wanted the reward, but not the work. And you made your choice. Tyler's voice cracked. You set us up. I shook my head slowly. No. You set yourselves up. Then I turned to their lawyer, young, quiet, seated in the corner. This meeting is over. I stood and left the binder on the table. Not as a weapon. As a record. They stayed seated for a while, perhaps hoping I'd come back. I didn't. The door eventually clicked shut behind them. And I stood at the back window, watching the wind move through the orchard again. The trees didn't notice what had passed. And neither would I, eventually. After they left, the house stayed quiet for a long time. Not the heavy kind of silence that presses on your chest. This one was lighter. Like something had been removed. I made myself a bowl of soup and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Tyler used to do homework, where Peter used to sort mail, where we laid out blueprints in the early days. The same table where, just hours earlier, my son had asked if I had set him up. I didn't feel triumphant. Just steady. They didn't return that week. No more calls. No more threats. The buyer formally rescinded the agreement, citing misrepresentation. Frank handled it with quiet efficiency. Tyler and Madison were left with nothing but the legal dust of what they had nearly stolen. That Saturday, I changed the locks, not out of fear, but finality. Then I began moving through the house, room by room, making small changes. I boxed up old paperwork, sent a few items to storage, moved Peter's books into my study. I donated the office chair Tyler had once insisted on, back when he still worked here. It squeaked too much, anyway. The house felt mine again. Not just in name, but in presence. In the mornings, I resumed my walks through the orchard. The trees had begun blooming early, pale blossoms dusting the branches like lace. I walked slowly, hand on the old fence Peter built, the wood soft and gray from years of rain and sun. Neighbors noticed. Marjorie from 2 doors down stopped by with jam and said, "You look more yourself lately." "I feel more myself lately," I replied. I even opened a small division again, quietly, under the trust's umbrella. 2 young managers from out of state. No fanfare. Just order forms and contracts, modest and manageable. The purpose returned without the noise. I didn't tell Tyler. I didn't need to. The only sound in the house was the wind through the cracked kitchen window and the occasional chime of my mantel clock. Peace was no longer a thing I hoped for, it had arrived, uninvited, but welcome. One afternoon, a thick envelope arrived, legal documents, neatly tabbed and organized. It included a letter from the buyer. Professional. Brief. They hoped for future collaboration but understood my position. The closing line struck me. Some legacies resist easy purchase. I kept that line, folded it into my ledger notebook beside Peter's last entry. The same day, I received a letter, handwritten, smudged in places. It was from Tyler. He didn't ask for money. He didn't defend himself. He simply said that Madison had left. That he was staying with a college friend. That he was trying to start over. That he was sorry. He asked if we could talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I took the letter, folded it once, and tucked it into the bottom drawer of Peter's desk. Not to forget. Just to leave it somewhere it couldn't reach me unless I chose. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine, something dry, with the smell of soil and old barrels, and sat on the back porch. The sky was orange at the edges. The trees shimmered faintly. My chair creaked gently beneath me. Some echoes, I've learned, aren't meant to be answered. The weeks passed without ceremony. No more lawyers. No more contracts. No more calls. Only the small sounds that make up a life, the kettle whistling, the rustle of the paper, the soft creak of the porch swing as it settles into its own memory. I began waking earlier, not out of habit, but by choice. I liked the way the light looked just before 7, sliding slowly through the lace curtains in the kitchen. That quiet light made everything look softer, kinder. Some mornings, I walked barefoot to the orchard with a cup of tea, just to feel the grass again. Peter always said that feet remember the land before the mind does. I never believed it, but I think I understand now. I kept the business small, intentionally so. The new managers were competent and unassuming. They called me Claire, not Mrs. Carson, and that suited me. We spoke once a week, always briefly, always respectfully. No one asked for more than what I was willing to give. There were no photos of Tyler in the office. I let the land take over where Noyes used to live. I painted the guest room pale green. Gave the den back to the books. Removed the plaque Peter had once insisted on, the one by the entryway that read, Carson Solutions HQ. That chapter had closed. But I didn't lock it in bitterness. Just shelved it neatly. Some afternoons, I drove into town and bought tulips, always white, and placed them in Peter's old water jug on the table. I liked the way the petals curled inward like they had secrets. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and soil, the way it did in the early years. Neighbors began stopping by more often. Not out of pity, but comfort. Marjorie asked if I'd join the church garden group. I said I might. And one Thursday, the mailman, a young man named Caleb, asked if I'd be willing to teach a short workshop at the high school on small business operations. Just a couple of sessions, he said. Nothing big. I almost said no. Then I said, yes. The first session was awkward. The kids were half distracted, their phones buzzing. But by the end of the hour, 2 of them lingered to ask more. One asked, "Did it hurt when you lost your company?" I smiled. "I didn't lose it," I said. I took it back. They didn't quite understand, but they nodded like they wanted to. That night, I cooked myself a full dinner, roasted potatoes, fish, even dessert. I ate with a napkin in my lap, music playing softly from Peter's old radio. I didn't need the applause. I didn't need the thank you speeches or legacy walls or online profiles. I just needed the quiet assurance that I had not disappeared. I had, in fact, returned. To myself. To my home. To a life not built around being needed, but being whole. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. 2 months later, the letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Tyler's. Neat, careful, just like when he was young, when he'd write notes to his father on post-its and stick them on the refrigerator. "Good luck today, Dad," or "Don't forget, spelling test." The envelope was heavier than expected. Inside was a single page, folded twice. No fancy paper, no heading. Just his words. "Mom," it began. "No, dear. Just that. I know I've failed you." He wrote that he was sorry. That he had let things happen too fast, that Madison had pushed, but he hadn't resisted. That he believed he was doing what was best, even when it wasn't right. He wrote that he was staying with a college friend now. That Madison had left, no details, just that she was gone. That the apartment he lived in was small but enough. He said the worst part wasn't losing the money. It was realizing, too late, what he'd traded for it. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask to come back. He only asked if, one day, we could talk. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it back up and placed it inside the drawer in the hallway cabinet, the one where I keep Peter's old watches, a bundle of birthday cards, and the faded cloth napkins we used for Thanksgiving dinners long past. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because the version of Tyler I once knew had gone quiet long before the letter came. That afternoon, I lit the fireplace. Outside, the wind pulled at the last of the orchard's blossoms. I wrapped myself in the blue shawl Peter bought me on our 25th anniversary and poured a glass of red wine. The fire crackled softly, steady and low. I didn't cry. I didn't reminisce. I simply let the silence settle. Some echoes aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to fade, gentle reminders of where you've been, not where you're going. I sat by the window as the sun slipped behind the trees. My breath fogged the glass slightly. In the stillness, I could almost hear Peter's voice again, calm and patient. Let things land where they belong, Claire. Not everything is yours to catch. And so I didn't. I let the letter sit. I let the past be past. And I stayed where I was, warm, quiet, and entirely unclaimed. It rained the next morning. The kind of soft, steady rain that doesn't ask for attention. I stood by the window with a cup of tea, watching the water stripe down the glass, collecting in thin veins before slipping into the sill. The house was warm. Quiet. Mine. I didn't expect any more letters. Tyler had said what he needed to say. And I had said nothing back, which, in a way, was my answer. There was no fury left, no desire to be understood. Only space. Only peace. I walked through the room slowly, checking nothing in particular. The hallway light needed a new bulb. The back porch had a loose board I'd been meaning to replace. Ordinary things. My things. In the study, I paused by Peter's desk. I opened the middle drawer and pulled out the small notebook where I kept my quiet tallies, notes about repairs, garden plans, recipes I kept forgetting. And now, one more entry. Today, nothing expected. Nothing owed. I closed the notebook. Later, I made a pie, blackberry, with the last of the frozen fruit from last summer. I didn't rush. I didn't worry if the crust was uneven. When it was done, I let it cool on the sill, the steam curling up like breath in winter. As it cooled, I walked to the orchard, umbrella in hand. The trees were soaked but still. No wind, just rain tapping at leaves like a memory you don't need to answer. Near the far edge, there's a stone bench Peter built with his own hands. I sat there, letting the rain fall around me, not on me. My coat caught the mist anyway. I didn't mind. I thought of the early days, late-night paperwork, mislabeled packages, Peter cursing at the old label printer. I thought of Tyler as a child, sitting in the corner of the garage with headphones on, drawing dinosaurs while we packed boxes. He used to fall asleep on the floor while we worked. Back then, he trusted that we would carry him. And we did. But that boy was gone. And I was still here. Whole. Quiet. Free. When I returned home, I poured a small glass of wine and sat by the fire. The pie was still warm. I didn't eat it right away. I just looked at it. Something made for no occasion. Just because. I didn't lose a son. I lost the illusion of one. And that loss finally made space for peace.